Okay, this video is about Dr. Greger's new How Not to Die documentary. And I'm going to give you two perspectives. First, the pros, then the cons. The pros are mostly my girlfriend's opinion. I watched it with my girlfriend. And I can tell you, most of the time, she don't really care about anything I watch, and she doesn't really like most of what I watch. She thinks it's boring, and she'll go off and do something else. But we only watched like the first part of the Greger's documentary one night, and then she remembered it. I saw her a couple days later. She goes, "Let's watch the other part. I really like that thing." So the fact she was interested in it, she'd be like, I'd say, like a intermediate level knowledge person about nutrition, but she really wanted to watch the whole thing. And then she loved it. She said it is so good, that Dr. Greger's so clever. He had so many good speakers for interviews. He created such a show with all the music and the drama and the stage and walking around. It was more like a movie than a lecture. It makes me want to eat plant foods. And I think that's a good statement, that the video was very positive on making people want to eat plant foods. It was almost like a religious experience to convert them to wanting to eat plant foods. Okay? And I think that's good because vegans have a bad reputation. I can tell you, when I talk to people who have nothing to do with nutrition, they often say things to me like, "You should not call yourself a vegan. Everybody hates vegans. They think they're crazy. Animal rights, watermelon jerks. They don't like them." Okay? And they tell me, "Don't call yourself vegan. That's like an insult." All right? So anyways, he makes it cool to eat plant foods, respectable to eat plant foods, and motivates people to want to eat plant foods. So I think that's all great. Okay. He made a good point in the video. It was said by T. Colin Campbell, but it was a point of the video that there really should be a medical specialty for nutrition. He did go through some really great papers, like the blood pressure in the African native, Lancet, 1929, about the paper showing there was no coronary artery disease in Uganda, including the autopsy studies. How the vegan diet was great for weight loss, how the Seventh-day Adventist studies showed that the vegan version of the SDAs were the best off, and it's a relatively controlled population in the sense that, there's not a lot of issues with alcohol and cigarettes and all that. That's good. It gives a motivated person something to look up, if they want to study more. So there was some advanced information. Okay, it wasn't all just like, beginner stuff. He did show that total cholesterol dropped, from 206 to 147 on average in a group of patients in about 2 weeks, a little more than 2 weeks on a plant-based diet. He would always call it whole food plant-based diet. He wouldn't say low-fat vegan. He would specifically say whole food plant-based diet. And again, the word plant-based diet is a way to avoid the word vegan. Okay, and he emphasized that. T. Colin Campbell kind of emphasized that term, whole food plant-based diet, calling it whole food is a way to get away from food processing, which is good. Okay, and Greger has some really good quotes. One of them is, he said before, given that coronary artery disease is the most common cause of death in the USA, and that only whole food plant-based diet can reverse it, shouldn't whole food plant-based diet be the recommended diet? Okay, but the best line in the whole video, and I think the best quote Dr. Greger's ever said, and I think he's always going to be remembered for this, was the most common cause of premature death in America is the American diet. So that was an awesome quote. Okay, now I'm going to give you some of the negatives. Okay, and basically my point of view was the documentary was something like about an hour and 20 minutes, and the basic message was plants are good, but meat is bad. Okay, and that's great, and that's true. But there really wasn't a lot more information than that. There was no clear recommendations beyond plants are good, meat is bad. Okay, so it was really sort of an emotional introductory lecture more so than anything else. And it reminded me of a Sinclair Lewis quote. He says, "I'm not that fond of oratory that's so full of energy it hasn't any room for facts." Now, don't get me wrong, that's a little bit of a harsh quote. But the video was very entertaining, very well done, very sophisticated. You could tell there was a lot of money behind it. There was very sophisticated transitions between scenes. The sound was perfect. The coordination with the music was perfect. What I'm trying to say is whoever edited that video and did the sound, they know what they're doing, okay? They're not like me, if I can dumb shit by myself with a webcam, okay? Who doesn't... You get my point. That was highly produced. That was a top-level commercial product, okay? All right, so other things I would say about it. He didn't talk about organic. There's a giant benefit to eating organic compared to non-organic. Organic's not perfect, but it's the best you can do, and it should be emphasized to avoid the glyphosate, the atrazine, and a whole bunch of other bad chemicals. There was no specific criticism of fat in general. He did, talk about the problems with saturated fat, which is basically like saying animal fat, but he didn't go into all the problems of fat in general. He recommended whole food plant-based diet rather than low-fat vegan, and there's an issue with that. And let me explain. What I'm trying to say is it's a bait and switch, and the bait and switch tactic works like this. You talk about all the greatness of whole food plant-based diet, primarily the results obtained with low-fat vegan diets, and then you claim that it was sort of just whole food plant-based diet. And what that does is it creates a window to sell high-fat foods, but it was really the low-fat vegan where the benefits come from. You see the trick? And by saying whole food plant-based diet rather than low-fat vegan, you leave the door open to promote and sell all these high-fat foods, which are super profitable. Things like nuts and seeds and soy and flax and olive oil and omega-3. And not to mention, these foods have a significant amount of saturated fat, okay? Coming from a plant rather than an animal, all right? So that's tricky, okay? And in my opinion, here's my quote. The two most dangerous words in the nutrition world are good fats. All fats are bad, other than you get a little bit of your fiber converted into, short-chain fatty acids, okay? And that's enough. There's a tiny bit of fat, Pritikin has shown you don't even need 1% of calories from fat. 0.75% of calories from fat in several studies were shown to be adequate to keep people well nourished, okay? I think it was the White and the McLean studies. All right, so anyways, it's impossible to be too low in fat eating a low-fat vegan diet. And Dr. McDougall and Nathan Pritikin have said that repeatedly. In addition, on his YouTube channel, Nutrition Facts, he says he has a lecture saying, where he has a lady say it, but, that MSG, and I think I've heard him say it in the past too, MSG is okay, monosodium included. And in my opinion, it is not. MSG is an excitotoxin. It's a bit of a stimulant in a sense. It mimics the effect of sympathetic autonomic nervous system, which is the stress response. So there's a bit of an elevation in cortisol. The neurotransmitter glutamate is excitatory. So it's a bit of like sympathetic autonomic nervous system. In comparison, the inhibitory neurotransmitter GABA is like PANS, parasympathetic autonomic nervous system. So what I'm trying to say, MSG is a bit of a stressor. It's going to elevate cortisol a little bit. And Dr. Rieger also promotes caffeine beverages like coffee and tea. Well, those elevate the stress hormones, cortisol and catecholamine. So if you're adding on board MSG and caffeine, you're going to elevate cortisol and catecholamines. And what do? They raise blood pressure. They raise blood lipids, meaning they increase atherosclerosis risk, okay? They increase diabetes risk. They increase atherosclerosis, meaning coronary artery disease risk, and cerebral vascular risk. Not to mention that caffeine is also a cerebrovascular blood flow constrictor. It decreases blood flow to the brain in the ballpark of 20%. Some papers say 25%, in the ballpark of 20%. But that's actually bad because simultaneously you're dropping cerebral blood flow. You're also increasing glutamate transmission, meaning that you're elevating the neuronal metabolic rate while diminishing its blood supply. Not a good combination, especially as people get older. So it's a neurotoxin. Anything that increases glutamate transmission is what is called an excitotoxin. It's an excitotoxin, and it's a vascular toxin as well, and it's a metabolic toxin. Caffeine is not a health food, okay? All that nonsense about coffee and tea being good for you, it's nonsense. It's just commercial products that are being promoted, okay? And he doesn't talk about water filtration, pretty basic thing, So, he doesn't talk about fluoride being rat poison, aluminum being a major neurotoxin, all the estrogenics in water, as well as the other toxic chemicals routinely found in water. So what I'm trying to say is, my overall opinion of the documentary was it was a great, feel good, be happy about plant foods, wonderful thing to show to beginners and sort of early intermediates. And I can tell you the typical person, like my girlfriend would be a perfect example. She loved it and thought it was fantastic, okay? But to somebody who knows nutrition, I'm glad. It was good that he did mention these great papers, the blood pressure paper in Kenya, the Uganda no coronary artery disease paper, the weight loss from the vegan, Seventh-day Adventist study. Okay, that's all good. That's really good. But what I'm trying to say is, this was not like some intellectual academic breakthrough, okay? And I think the bottom line was this leaves the door open to promote all this high-fat stuff that makes, and this caffeine and MSG that makes people sick. And I'll also tell you, why do I think it happens this way? Because when you criticize things, you piss people off and you get shadow banned and nobody wants you to sponsor you and nobody wants anything to do with you. So look at me. I get 100, 200 views for my videos. No one wants to interview me. I'm considered an asshole. I'm ostracized from the community because I tell the truth about unpleasant things. When you criticize, fluoride, caffeine, all these high-fat, profitable commercial foods, you become verboten, man. Nobody wants to talk to you. I'm just an asshole. I'm not welcome on the bro science circuit. Of course not, because I don't sell supplements. I'm not welcome on the high-fat phony circuit because I don't promote these high-fat foods. So I'm really almost not welcome anywhere. And who knows if they're going to delete my channel. At least I have my channel for now. But I still feel it's my duty to tell the truth and provide a little more information, something more advanced than all the baby talk all over the internet. So anyways, bottom line, it's a great video for beginners and it's good for intermediates, but it's still kind of really introductory level content.